Hello, this is Israel Update, and I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv. I was going to tell you that Mike Doran is in Washington, D.C., but this is just barely true because why, Mike?
I'm coming to the Holy Land.
Okay, so perhaps...
The Jews need me to lead them to victory.
So we'll see you on this side very soon. You're actually finishing this recording and rushing to the airport, right?
That's right.
Good. So the first thing I want to show you today, just for the good mood, is Hassan Nasrallah, because part of the reasoning behind this show is that the news about Israel is terribly skewed by a press that is at the very least obsessed with overthrowing a right-wing government, and some of it is downright hostile to Israel, and this is true of the American and the Israeli press. But Hassan Nasrallah apparently understands this very well, and here is what he thinks of the Israeli press.
دائما الإسرائيلي هو بيساعد على إرعاب ناسه، على إرهابهم. هذا أن نحن حديث بقول الحمد لله الذي جعل أعداءنا من الحمقى أو من الحمقاء. هو أصلا بيساعد جزء كبير من الرعب والخوف الذي يطال سكان المستعمرات والمستوطنات في شمال فلسطين المحتلة وعند الحدود سببها الإعلام الإسرائيلي، إنه هو بضخم الأمور بطريقة هو مخمن عم يعمل علينا حرب نفسية وعلى ناسنا بيطلع عم يعمل على ناسه.
Gadi, what he's saying here, of course, applies to the Israeli press, but also to the New York Times. And it's interesting. Nasrallah understands it better than we do.
The press understands it perfectly well. They know what they're doing, of course. So in this episode, we are going to talk, of course, about the assassination of Salah Aruri in Beirut, and we have a massive part of the show about judicial review, about the Israeli judiciary and it's weaponizing judicial review, I might say. But more on this point we'll have on the news bulletin, right, Mike? So over to you.
Okay, yeah, on the news bulletin, we've got three different groups of subjects today. It's a long bulletin. We've got the internal issues, then the war issues, and then a little bit of diplomacy going on. Let's start with the internal issues. Gadi, since we last met on Monday night, the High Court of Justice, that's Israel's Supreme Court, it struck down a law that was passed last September that limits the court's power to use the doctrine of reasonableness to abolish legislation and policies. This was a momentous step in the legal and political crisis that gripped the country before the war with Hamas, and which pits the court against the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The court ruled in a very slim 8-7 majority to vote down the law in its entirety. The court ruling was quickly rebuked by top government officials, including Justice Minister Yariv Levin, who wrote, quote, "The judge's decision to publish the decision during a war is the opposite of the spirit of unity needed at this time for the success of our fighters on the front." He also described, unquote, he also described the ruling as creating a, quote, situation in which it is even impossible for the Knesset and the government to legislate basic laws or to make decisions without the judge's approval, unquote. That's what you, Gadi, call bagatzokratia, which you will tell us about later.
Yeah.
The High Court of Justice also ruled yesterday, that's on Wednesday, on another piece of legislation that curtailed the circumstances under which the prime minister might be declared incapacitated or otherwise incapable of executing his duties. The court did not strike down this law, but instead ruled that it would only be applied after the next Knesset was elected and sworn into office. According to the majority opinion, the legislation was, quote, patently personal, unquote, and it was tailored to suit Prime Minister Netanyahu's specific needs and as such constituted, quote unquote, abuse of the Knesset's authority.
It's nice how in the bulletin, Mike, you make everything sound like objective news. I would put it much more bluntly. The court has developed an instrument to cancel the elections in Israel, and remove a sitting prime minister. But
Well, I
please
think
don't
that
disturb the
no,
bulletin. Please go on.
no. I think this is what you. This is my job is to sound almost like I'm reading the news, and then you explain to us what's really going on. Okay. Onto the war. Saleh Arouri, the deputy director of Hamas's political bureau, was killed on Tuesday evening in Beirut, along with several other senior Hamas commanders. According to media reports, Arouri was killed by a missile strike on a building in the heart of Beirut's Dakhia quarter, which is Hezbollah's stronghold, of course. And we're now, while I'm talking here, we should be looking at, you should be seeing on your screen images of his funeral, which took place Thursday. Israel has not assumed responsibility for the operation, but is broadly assumed to have been the party that carried out the strike. Prime Minister Netanyahu held a security consultation with his fellow war cabinet members Wednesday night to discuss the developments and the potential repercussions, while the IDF raised its state of alert along the northern border and deployed additional Iron Dome assets. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled his scheduled visit to Israel later this week as a result of the assassination. Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, gave a speech yesterday, Wednesday, in which he made only vague threats to retaliate for the Arouri assassination. Israel Hayom's military affairs commentator Yoav Limor writes, this was the second time, quote, this was the second time since October 7th that Nasrallah has given Hamas the cold shoulder, unquote. Limor adds, for Israel, this is reassuring twice over. First, because it tempers concerns about particularly violent retaliation by Hezbollah, which would oblige a commensurate Israeli retaliatory strike and would put both sides at risk of entering into a major conflagration. And second, because it demonstrates that Hezbollah is deterred and, contrary to its previous warnings, is prepared to tolerate a painful blow in its home court in the heart of Beirut's Dakhia quarter. And then on to the diplomacy. Amos Hochstein, the special envoy of President, what's our president's name? President Biden is in Israel as I am speaking, and he is talking to the Israeli government about a diplomatic solution to the tension between Hezbollah and Israel in the north. Quote, there is a short window of time for diplomatic understandings, unquote, said Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant directly to Amos Hochstein. There is only one possible result, a new reality in the northern arena, which will enable the secure return of our citizens, Gallant continued. Yet we find ourselves at a junction. There's a short window of time for diplomatic understandings, which we prefer. We will not tolerate the threats posed by the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, and we will ensure the security of our citizens, unquote. Back to you, Gadi.
So let's start with judicial review, and before we delve into the mechanics of this is very hard to explain. I mean, I guess it could be rendered satirically because it's Alice in Wonderland. The world of Israeli jurisprudence is completely postmodern, and nothing means what it seems to mean. But before that, let's take the bird's eye view at what's going on, because before this war broke out, the country was gripped by a terrible conflict between the supporters of the reform and the objectors to the reform. It went so far that many of them declared that they would not serve in the army under a government who promotes such a reform. They never called it a reform, they called it a political coup, which of course it never was. It was an attempt to curb the imperial powers of the Supreme Court in Israel, which turned itself to an uber government. But it was very, very controversial, and it tore the country apart. People were talking about a civil war. I don't think there was a real danger of a civil war, but at least there was a lot of talk about it. And then came the war, and people said, okay, forget everything else. We are now, we need to unify to fight the common enemy. And now in the midst of a war, the Supreme Court makes two controversial decisions which go straight to the heart of the strife that Israel experienced before the war. These are the most divisive issues. And basically what it does here is an attempt with a strike of a pen to decide the issues that were tearing the country apart unilaterally. Remember that the objectors to the reform kept saying you can't do such a thing without haskama rechava, without broad agreement of both sides. So now the court, which was always the most radical pole in this controversy, has just given two decisions which are supposed to finally decide both issues, and the content of those decisions, our side has been saying that the supporters of the reform making things much worse than they were before the reform, because now the court is it turned itself into the sovereign in Israel. Is that an exaggeration, Mike? It's your job to say yes, of course.
Yes, it's an exaggeration. No, I have a response to that, but before we get to my response, let's just note, I think we noted it last time, but in case somebody didn't see the show last time, that Esther Kut is on her way out.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's so amazing about this decision is that it was made because they realized it was their last chance.
Yeah, and to underscore
it's your job to explain to everybody who Esther Kut is and how she's on her way out.
Esther Kut is the president of the court, what would be in America the Chief Justice, and she has retired. But after her retirement, she has 90 days in which she can still participate in court decisions. So, and this limit would come on, it would be in 8 days from now. So they had to rush with those.
So she's right. She's walking out the door, and before she walks out, and because the chance that they will get there, it was a one-person majority they had. So
for the first decision,
yeah.
And she's retiring, and another judge, Anat Baron, is retiring, and both of them are on the radical side. So we a week and a day from now, this decision would not have passed, although it changed the structure of Israel's regime. So before we explain how, here is something to tell you something about the mood, Mike. This is it's not a cartoon, it's a more elaborate thing. It's a collage because it has a picture of the Supreme Court here, and under it are the soldiers dying in Gaza. And what this means is that the soldiers dying in Gaza, what it insinuates, are dying to preserve you quoted me as saying bagatzokratia. I translated to English as a juristocracy. So they're fighting, but as they are fighting to uphold a new kind of regime where the real government is a Supreme Court. So a lot of people, Mike, are feeling that way.
What I was going to say in response to your analysis, the thing that is interesting to me as an outsider when I talk to Israelis, because I still have friends that are on the Israeli left, and there are two completely different visions of reality. So the left says that Netanyahu and his government threw the country into this chaos before October 6th. So all of the disunity, weakness, and so on, they pin on Netanyahu, and they see it, his drive. They see the drive for judicial reform as him trying to change the laws so that he can escape justice in his personal trials, and that is what created the weakness. Whereas from your point of view, you see a huge power grab by the Supreme Court, and the attempt of the political or the legislative branch of government and the executive to claw back some of the authority that they rightly have in the Israeli system. I'm of course more sympathetic to your interpretation, but to me, as an outsider looking at it, the thing that's so striking is that both sides see a totally different reality. This is something we're familiar with now, We saw it here in the United States with Trump, in Britain with Brexit. Everybody gets their media from people that they agree with, and then they live right next to each other, and they walk down the same streets, but they see a totally different reality.
Yeah, that's exactly true. In this case, one side is lying. There was never anything in the reform. There was never anything in the reform. You'll not make
Of
me
course,
moderate.
I know. But when I talk to my left-wing friends, they say you're a liar. You know, they always
Yeah, no,
people.
there are two sides to the issue. Only one is true. Because what isn't true is that the reform was never going to help Netanyahu in his trial in any way. If anything, it was going to anger the judges. It had nothing to do with his trial, and people were yearning for this reform for a long time. Because, and here's again the big picture. In 1977, the Labor party lost its hegemony and lost its power to the Likud, and Menachem Begin came to power, as probably our viewers all know. But hegemony, or the labor or the left, was not going to just submit to the peaceful transference of power. And what it did is it began to move the decision-making centers and the decision-making powers into areas that it still controlled: academia, the bureaucracy, some of the economy, and especially the Supreme Court. And this met with the extreme ambitions of the most activist judge, I think, in the known universe, Aaron Barak. Judge Bork in America called him a judicial buccaneer. So Aaron Barak invented, it changed Israel's regime from a parliamentary democracy into a constitutional democracy by declaring that Israel had a constitution, although it didn't know. And these are our basic laws. And that based on this constitution, the Supreme Court can strike down parliamentary legislation. When there was an uproar around that, and then he said, you know, the basic laws are legislated by the Knesset. The Knesset can change the rules of the game. It's up to the Knesset. And now the
Knesset passed a new basic law, and they knocked it down.
And they knocked it down based on nothing at all. If the decision, Mike, the decision about striking down this amendment about reasonableness, we'll say a word about what that means. The decision is 948 pages, I think, long. When judges write something so long, it is because they do not have an argument. They do not have an argument. And the funniest argument was Esther Kut. Esther Kut said that this amendment to the basic law changes the rule of the game, and it can't do it on the basis of such a slim minority as 64 out of 120 parliament members. But her decision to strike it down was on the vote of one judge. And she totally changed the rules of the game, because if the Supreme Court now controls the process of constitution writing, of amending the Constitution, then the Supreme Court in Israel is the unelected permanent constitutional convention. That is the real meaning of what.
So what is the what do you think is it? Do you have any thoughts about the long-term impact of this decision? Because the response by Yariv Levin and so on, by the architects of the reform, was pretty tame. I thought it was in keeping with the spirit of let's take care of the war, and all this other stuff we'll take care of later.
I think that in the short run, our hopes should be pinned on their hubris and not on the right doing anything, because the right is always mamlachti. It's always the responsible party. When the left
mamlachti means there's no word in English.
No word.
Statist, but you know, protective of the state of Israel, I guess.
Avi's translation, our friend Professor Avi Bareli, who wrote a book called Mamlachtiyut, says that the obvious translation in America is usually statism, and this is very misleading. And what Avi said, it's republicanism with a small r. It's the public spirit, the care for the res publica. And so the responsible behavior, and this is how Ben Gurion, you're the friend just behind your left shoulder, always always emphasized. So I don't know how this will turn out, but listen, this is just part one of the story, because now came the Nivtzarut. Now the Nivtzarut is an amazing thing. Nivtzarut is actually a word you do have in English, and most democracies have in their constitutional structure. It's incapacitation. So when the president of the United States is incapacitated by, I don't know, a stroke, or by being extremely,
we have that in our history. We have that in our history when the president is incapacitated, like Woodrow Wilson was. Some would say FDR. What we do is we hide it from everybody.
until. But there is a clause in your constitution, I think, or in one of the amendments, I don't remember now, that says what you do in that case. And in that case, it goes, the vice president assumed the presidency until the president is back in shape, or else permanently, as happened to, I don't know, John F. Kennedy. So in 2020, and this is why I said at the beginning of the show that Israeli jurisprudence is a surreal world. It's Salvador Dali. It's Alice in Wonderland. Nothing means anything. So Mandelblit, who was the legal counsel to the government and also the attorney general, we call him the attorney general, it's translated to the attorney general usually, said there is substantive incapacitation. So, or essential incapacitation, depending on how you want a translation. And whenever Israeli jurist says substantial or essential on something, they're up to no good. And what he meant is that they were toying with the idea that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is standing trial, he can possibly be substantially incapacitated, though in perfect health, that is unable to run the country because of the trial. You see, they couldn't remove him with all these indictments. They couldn't win in the ballot box. And they didn't even win when he was standing trial, because the law in Israel, the basic law executive, which says how the executive should behave and what's the executive's authority, also says that you can't remove the head of the executive, which is here the prime minister, unless he is convicted in the last court of appeal in something that's more than a misdemeanor or worse. So after all this didn't work, they now invented a new tool to remove a prime minister because he is substantially incapacitated. So when you
and let me just add one other dimension here. I think you'll probably agree with this, that when October 7th hit, there were two things that happened. One is the Netanyahu got a reprieve with regard to all of these attacks, because there was this notion that the country should unify, focus on the war, and the politics will be delayed until after victory. But then, as time goes on, people are seeing that victory is a long way away, and Netanyahu's reprieve then is getting longer and longer, and
they can't take that,
and they can't take that. At the same time, they also see that his popularity has gone down significantly because of October 7th. So there's a desire to take advantage here of the declining popularity as a result of October 7th. Is that a fair way to put it?
It is. There are two further moves in this chess game, because once Yariv Levin introduced his judicial reform, by the way, we should put a link to that. The full laying out of his judicial reform was in my podcast, my Hebrew podcast, Shomer Saf Gatekeeper, and there's a version with English subtitles. If you want,
yeah,
we'll put
absolutely.
A link.
Yeah, let's
put a link to that, so we can go back to last January to that. So before they went that, there was a fear that they will use this substantial incapacitation to remove Netanyahu. So the government moved to clarify that in the basic law executive, to say that the chief executive cannot be incapacitated, cannot be removed for incapacitation except on health, psychological and physical health issues, and the only authority for doing that resides with the cabinet and the Knesset.
And so they were moving. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about the two worlds, because they were moving to create a new definition, of incapacitation, and when the Knesset moved to block their innovation, they then claim that the Knesset is that the government is making laws based solely to protect Netanyahu.
Exactly. Which is, and they say it was a personal law. Now, the thing is, it was a personal attack. The legislation itself was not personal. It had to do with all prime ministers henceforth, and it's a very good thing because otherwise the attorney general can just remove governments. She can decide that he's incapacitated. It's now a woman, Gali Barav Miara, and they're making noises, but the court said it didn't strike it down. It just postponed it till the next Knesset so that it doesn't apply in a personal way. Now, there is nothing in the Israeli law that allows the Supreme Court to decide when laws take effect. They invented this power to themselves as well, but they don't need any authorization in anything, because the judicial philosophy of Esther Kut and her band of buccaneers, of judicial buccaneers, is that did I say this already here, Mike? I think I did. Is that we the judges are educated, enlightened Ashkenazi people, and it's obvious
Gadi,
that we should make the.
Aren't you an Ashkenazi?
I just pointed at myself, Mike. Of course, I'm an Ashkenazi.
Don't you
why
think,
I'm also
why
considered...
don't you think that your people should have the right to rule?
No, I am a Democrat, and so what I quoted, I think in one of our last shows, is
you're a Democrat with a small d.
Someone, yeah, sure. Someone put their hand on my shoulder twice in academic conferences and say, "Taub, who do you want to make the decision? Dorit Benish or Eli Aflalo," which is a non-Ashkenazi name. It's a Mizrahi name. So
my answer to these questions, it's easy to determine the answer to these questions. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's a way to, when people ask that, the question is who has the best food, and there's no.
That's not.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Do you want kebab or you want gefilte fish? There's no question here.
Nicely put, Mike Doran. So in the eyes of these people, it's clear that the greatest danger to democracy is citizens, and so we shouldn't allow those wild animals to just roam free and decide things, because we are their legal custodians. So if you think Israel is a democracy, it used to be, but it doesn't seem to be anymore.
We've talked a lot about this, but there is one more thing that is worth telling the viewers, Gadi, and that is that the power of the Supreme Court is so much greater than the power that of our court here. Not just because they have all of these legal mechanisms for overriding everybody else, but because there are all of these legal advisors in all of the government ministries who look to the court to tell them what to do, including on matters of policy. So the court it's like an octopus with arms that go into the bureaucracies.
Exactly. So as we say here, the court also has an executive branch. It also controls the executive branch, because the legal advisors are not really advisors. They are the bosses of the ministers, because they can forbid them to enact policies that the advisors don't like or think are unreasonable. Because if your legal advisor doesn't want your policy, he can tell you it's not ze lo bagitz. It will not pass bagatz. So often the ministers just retreat. And as a last thing for this long item on the judiciary, if you want to see the unlimited power of the court, there was a very striking cartoon by O. Reichert, who is a leftist, a right-wing cartoonist, showing Esther Kut with a flag with the Muznaim.
What do you call it?
The scales?
The scales
of justice.
Yeah.
A flag with a scale of justice, by the way, it's green like Hamas, not blue like the Israeli flag. And she's standing with this flag on a dead IDF soldier. And so now
planting the
flag in the body of an
staff
IDF
in the
soldier.
back of the dead soldier. Yeah.
And so now the legal advisor to the court is saying that this is incitement to violence, which is a crime in Israel. So Esther Kut got angry just to show you who's the sovereign in this country. So Esther Kut got angry about a cartoon, and now the Attorney General is getting more than a hint that they should persecute this cartoonist who dared tarnish Esther's Kut image.
And what will happen to him?
I don't know. I don't know now. We no longer know anything that can happen here, because nobody in their right mind, when the court became political, what happens when the court is completely political is that people stop believing in justice. They think, oh, you will get justice if you're on the right, or on the right side, which is the left, and you won't get justice if you're on the right. And just to show you how extreme this was, Shefi Paz, who is an activist against illegal immigration, won a suit against a defamation suit against a Haaretz writer who called her a neo-Nazi. And then the judge said that she won the case and she should get compensation, but the compensation is reduced because she has criticized the system of the courts. So criticizing the system of the court changes your penalty. Imagine that. So if you think that we live under the rule of law, we don't. We live under the rule of judges, and this is why bagatzokratia, juristocracy. So now we are almost out of at least we're out of time for this item. So we won't explain the reasonableness clause, but we'll have an in-depth special with a jurist to tell you all you need to know about.
I want to say one thing about the future. I saw a very powerful clip of a soldier who was responding to all this, and wasn't necessarily responding from a right-wing point of view, but he was saying, you are in a bubble. You people who are talking about all this stuff, we're out here fighting. There's a war going on, and you're in this bubble talking about all this stuff. When we come back, meaning from Miluim, from reserve duty, when we come back from the front, there's going to be a reckoning. And I asked a friend of mine what he thought the reckoning meant, and he said what it means is anyone who starts a party saying the reservist party, revenge for the reservists, is going to have a lot of seats in the Knesset, which I thought was a very interesting interpretation.
Yeah, I think they wildly overplayed their hand, and people have been saying, we went to Miluim, to reserve service, to fight in Gaza as citizens, and we're returning as subjects. And this is, I think this is going to backfire terribly. But you never know, because the press.
So I don't know. Whenever I hear that this is gonna, we took a blow this week, but there's gonna be long term. It's gonna hurt them. I thought that the whole over here, the whole Russiagate thing was BS from beginning to end, and I said it from the minute it started. And of course, everyone just interpreted it. Do you like Trump? Do you dislike Trump? If you dislike Trump, then it was completely true that Russia, that he cut a deal with Russia, and that he sent Carter Page to Moscow to have secret all this complete nonsense. It was ridiculous. I mean, it was patently ridiculous, and very serious people took it very seriously for a long time. until they didn't. All right. And then all of a sudden it became not serious and everybody stopped talking about it. But there have been absolutely zero,
Reckoning.
what do you call it? Yeah, zero reckoning for anyone who carried that out. Zero,
Yeah,
none.
you know that when the Mueller report landed, there was a town hall in the New York Times, and Dean Buquet, is that how you pronounce your name? His name?
Bucket, I think.
Bucket, said in that town hall that the Mueller report caught us a little flat-footed. That's what he said. And so the answer is we're going to shift our coverage of race to the 1619 project.
Yeah,
that was the solution. There was no reckoning about the quality of journalism, only about the effectiveness of activism. That was what it was.
But there's been no reckoning by people in the FBI either who lied and all of
that only got worse. That only got worse.
Yeah.
And then we get to the laptop, and let's not start.
Let's get out. Let's get away from domestic American politics.
Yeah, Salah Harouri, assassinated in Beirut, probably by Israel, or everybody says by Israel.
It's
not
by
confirmed.
Israel. It's by Israel.
Are you confirming this? I hereby confirm.
I'm confirming. I looked in the mirror this morning and I asked myself who did it. It's Israel.
Not
every Israeli commentator is assuming it was Israel. I mean, I know you're not allowed to say it was Israel, and there's been no confirmation, but
you can. You're in America, and we can. Oh, you're going to come here, Mike, and then we'll lay a hand on you. You'll see. So Salah Harouri is.
If they let me in, I've been part of this effort I've been associated with you, and you're saying all these nasty things about Esther Kut. Her army might stop me at the.
That's very likely.
Not letting me in.
Salah Harouri is formerly director of Hamas Political Bureau, but in fact, he's in charge of the activities of Hamas in Judea and Samaria. So what does it mean that he was assassinated? And suppose it was by Israel. What does it mean? And what does it mean that it's done under Hassan Nasrallah's nose in Beirut?
I mean, number one, it shows that the Israelis are serious about tracking down all of the leadership of Hamas and eliminating them. Number two, it shows that Israel has incredible intelligence, that it knows. I mean, we take this kind of thing for granted, but there are very few countries in the world that can track an individual like that who is attempting not to be tracked and know exactly where he is at the exact right moment and put a missile on his head. That is that speaks to incredible intelligence and incredible connection between intelligence and operations.
The United States did the same with Qasem Soleimani.
The United States can do it. Israel can do it. The Turks
Israel
can do it in certain areas.
An individual in Beirut, but it can't figure out that Hamas is going to carry out with thousands of terrorists a breach of the fence.
No,
we should talk about this one day.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. But it also, the fact that they did it in the heart of Beirut, while this, because Hezbollah and Israel have been careful, both sides, to keep the conflict within about 5 or 7 kilometers of the border. And the Israelis, by doing this, they have gone way, way beyond that, obviously. And they're showing 3 different parties that they will not be forced to limit the conflict just to that border area, because that means they lose. Why does that mean they lose? Because the border area has been completely evacuated. And so Hezbollah is bragging and telling the world that they forced the Jews out of the north of Israel. And those people will not go back because they feel unsafe after what October 7th showed could happen. So the Israelis the Israeli government is trying to tell its own population, no, we're going to secure the north. The problem the Israeli government has in saying that is that they're under pressure from the Americans not to escalate in the north. That's what Amos Hochstein is doing there, and they're also afraid of what the Iranians might do in response. And this is they're concerned that Hezbollah might escalate, that Iran might escalate, and that America might get angry with Israel for escalating. And in that context, they went right to the heart of Beirut and killed Harouri, and that sends a message to Washington. It sends a message to Tehran, and it sends a message to Nasrallah. and also to the Israeli public that they're serious about what they're saying.
And is there a chance that this will escalate into a full-fledged war with Hezbollah?
Yes, of course there is. I think Nasrallah. I read the quote from Yoav Limor. Was it? I think that saying, or was it? I can't remember. One of the commentators said that Nasrallah put off the reckoning with Israel, to a time and place of his choosing. And that's being read in Israel right now as weakness. I think that's a little. I meant to say that's a little too strong. You should never underestimate the enemy. He has a lot of capabilities. He might come back. They might go target an Israeli senior leader somewhere, whether in Israel or outside of Israel. They might. One of the things that Hezbollah has not done until now, I don't think, is use precision-guided weaponry in Israel. Against the Israelis. So they may come back and hit in Israel, maybe within that 7-kilometer band, or maybe in some wider area. They may hit with a precision-guided weapon, with a big payload, cause more deaths, a lot of destruction. I don't know what they're going to do. They are going to respond, I'm sure, and then the Israelis will have to respond to the response. So I think it's very serious. I wouldn't gloat and sit back and say, ha, we did this and they didn't do anything. They have serious capabilities, and they are probably going to use them.
Okay, so the gathering storm. Israel has an interest in a solution to this problem that isn't diplomatic. I'm putting it this very, very softly. Many voices in Israel are saying we can't repopulate the north until we uproot Hezbollah completely, because all these Amos Hochstein's mediating suggestions of us giving them land for them retreating 5 kilometers is just nonsense, and this is a direct threat to our sovereignty. Yet we have been warned by the United States not to preempt Hezbollah, and you and I have talked about this a lot. So, is it possible to finish this subject that Israel is maneuvering to tempt Hezbollah into a full-fledged conflict?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think that the decision to kill Aruri, I think you can't. Those are operations that are dictated by the intelligence. You have the window, you know where he is, you know when it is. So you have to take that. You have to take that opportunity when it comes. Opportunities like that don't come around every other day. So I don't think that this was done in direct response to the Americans. But I can guarantee you, I mean, I can't guarantee you, but I would imagine, you imagine the room where Netanyahu is sitting with the security cabinet, and they have to make the decision whether to give a green light to the operation or not. And somebody in the room says, "But sir," or "But Mr. Netanyahu, Amos Hochstein is coming on Thursday to talk to us about a diplomatic solution with Hezbollah, and this will scuttle that, and it's going to annoy Hochstein and Biden, and
Blinken, who canceled his visit,
and Blinken, who canceled his visit." And so, what do you think? How do you think Netanyahu responded to that? And he said, "Thank you for your interest in national security. I'll keep that in mind. Let's go with the operation." That's the way it went.
Yeah, but I think that his game may be more sophisticated, and possibly Israel may be looking for an opportunity to escalate. I don't know that, and that's the reason why I'm saying it.
I think that I would put it this way. I don't think they're looking for an opportunity to escalate. I don't think the IDF is eager to escalate. I think they are. The way they're thinking about it right now is they have escalated a little bit. We talked about this in the last episode. The killing of the Iranian general Mousavi in Syria that's directly related to the Hezbollah capabilities, and that was an escalation. some of the strikes that they have carried out beyond that 7 kilometer before this strike into the heart of Beirut that they have carried out have been way beyond the 7 kilometer
Parameter, we
limit
say here.
perimeter, you say?
We
So
say.
what they are trying to do is they are trying to give Hochstein and the Americans some leverage over the Lebanese when they go to negotiate with the Lebanese. The focus of the Israelis is more on the Americans than it is on Hezbollah and Lebanon, because they want to make sure that when the time comes and they do have to escalate against Hezbollah, that they will have the Americans on their side.
Hardly likely, but let's see. We're out of time. And so the dumbest take on the news, Mike. What's your dumbest take on the news today?
Oh, my dumbest take. I have to go back to the Harvard University, the president of Harvard University resigning because of plagiarism. And I'm looking here. I'm trying to pull it up while I'm talking to you.
I have it. So here it is.
Oh, there. The Associated. There it is. The Associated Press reported that Harvard president's resignation highlights new conservative weapon against colleges: plagiarism. Like,
this is not the Babylon Bee.
This is not the Babylon Bee. This is the Associated Press, reputable news organization, and it reminded me, David Burge, Iowa Hawk. He's this guy on prominent pundit, or I don't know, humorist on Twitter. He has a famous take on the press where he said that the job of the press today is to cover important stories with a pillow until they die. So
that's great.
So it's to smother them. So I think that is the job of the press. It's to smother any story that's gonna work to the disadvantage of the left. But there are some stories, like the resignation of President Gay, that are too big to smother. So in that case, you have to say that if there's been some kind of scandal that harms the left, then the job of the press is to say, not to go into the details of the scandal, but to say the right is weaponizing the scandal against the left. And here you have it. I just found this to be the most ridiculous thing. It's laughable, but this is our press today.
So let's add this meme just because it's so funny. The 3 keys to success.
Yeah.
And
Control CV, which is control, copy, paste.
Control, copy, and control, paste. The 3 keys to success by Claudine Gay.
Yeah.
My dumbest take on the news is actually a funny thing, and not as dumb as it should have been, because this is now reality. It's not a meme. It's a sort of cartoon, and this is to go back to our judicial, our item on the judiciary. This is the Israeli flag with the gavel smashing or hovering over the
Careful. Is this incitement to violence? Careful.
Yeah. This is Esther Kut may go after us. So I'm deliberately speaking.
Don't say yeah. It's incitement to violence. Say no. It's not incitement to violence, but they may interpret it that way.
No, what I was going to say, that we're safe because we're speaking English, and judging by their jurisprudence, I don't assume they are fluent. No, this can actually, we can be persecuted for this, Mike. So when you come to Israel, when you pass passport control, just make sure to disown me. Make sure to
I have to tell, I think I've told our viewers this before, but it's so fun walking down the street. I was walking down the street, I don't know, a year ago, maybe with Gadi, it must have been summertime, maybe summer before last, in Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv, the center of Tel Aviv. And people, when they walk by, they say to Gadi, they whisper and they say, Gadi, Gadi, I'm with you. I'm with you. Or, one lady, I don't know, you remember one lady pulled you aside and she said, Gadi, Gadi, my husband is with you.
What are you
but
insinuating?
they say it under their breath because
Some
yeah,
do,
this
but this creates the wrong impression because some shouted out of taxis. But on the first days of the war, usually I don't get the other side. I get that on the press, but the two people in two separate occasions shouted at me because I support Bibi. Are 1,300 corpses not enough for you? So people,
so you caused the war.
yeah. They're blaming all the war on Netanyahu.
Because Netanyahu caused the dissension. The dissension made Israel weak. Hamas took advantage of it, and that's you did that, Gadi Taub.
Yeah. I did it myself. Just one more reason to disown me, Mike, when you come here. You don't want that responsibility on your shoulders.
Just so I just to make sure everyone understands, this is because you are you're a big public intellectual in Israel, and
I'm a vocal journalist, at least.
A vocal journal. No, you're not a journalist. And yeah, okay.
That is all from us. Mike is going to rush to the airport and come to Israel, and possibly we'll try to do an episode here live. Mike,
I'm coming to Israel on El Al, which means I'll be surrounded by ultra-Orthodox people.
That's the only airline that's flying to Israel from the United States.
What questions do you have for the ultra-Orthodox? Because I'll be with them on that trip.
I'll text them to you on WhatsApp.
Okay.
Thank you for watching this episode of Israel Update, and B'Shana Haba or B'Shavua Haba B'Yerushalayim. No, it's actually this week. As we just say, B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. It's tomorrow in Tel Aviv airport. Thanks for watching.